Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Pain, Heart, and Home Healing After Loss. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this episode today. I have someone here with me who I have been following on social media for like about over 2 years now. And actually, I think it was around when she had first maybe started her page or she was new to Instagram. I'm not sure, but I've had the honor and privilege of watching her grow like crazy on Instagram and watch her own podcast bloom and kind of just become internet buddies with her and just bond over things regarding mostly our homes and some similarities in our story. So I'm super excited to have decluttering expert Shannon Leyko with me today. Shannon, thank you so much for being here with me.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's so nice to actually chat outside of DMs, you know?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yes. Okay. So we could probably talk for hours. So I'm going to try to like hone this in a little bit. Because you and I could probably just talk about decluttering and all things home and things. So today I want to talk about something that is already starting to like flood the internet this time of year. It has such a universal term. And it's funny how when March or April roll around, everyone wants like a fresh start. So what do? They start spring cleaning their homes. And, you start seeing it all over the internet, spring cleaning videos, tips, tricks, reels, or even just they're just cleaning and you're just watching them clean their house. And hey, I talk a lot about cleaning too. So I'm not against, putting the time and effort into cleaning your home. But what's funny about this whole idea of spring cleaning is people want a clean house. So they give it a really deep clean, once a year if they're only spring cleaners, and then life goes on as normal, and before you know it, days, maybe a couple weeks later, their house is back to dirty again. And it kind of becomes this cycle of we want a fresh start, so let's get the house really clean this spring, and they clean it, and then all year round it just kind of goes back to the way that it was until you decide to clean it again. And so I think it's really funny that there's so much effort on this idea of spring cleaning because sure, it does feel amazing to have a clean home, but a clean home itself can be very temporary. And for the amount of time and energy and maybe even money that people pour into their spring cleaning every year, you would think it would be like life changing. So what I want to talk about today is kind of shifting people's perspective from spring cleaning to spring clearing. And so like I said, Shannon, I've been following your page for a while now. And honestly, I started my decluttering journey before I had found your page. And, most of my audience knows after our daughter died, my home kind of became like my coping mechanism. So I was cleaning, I was decluttering, reorganizing, DIY projects, like all of that stuff. And that's how I grew my page on Instagram. And so once my page grew, I then joined this community when I found your page on Instagram that was all about having like a manageable home. And these women, and myself included now, we're all so passionate about talking about how to simplify your life so that you could have, a clean home and do all the things you want to do, in life. And you don't have to think about cleaning up your home all the time, And so even though I've always been a cleaner, like I literally worked in the cleaning industry for a long time, I found this new way of life inside my home that affected every other area of my life outside of my home. And it all started with decluttering, with getting rid of a lot of my possessions, And so the first step I took to this new, simpler, easier way of life, and that was the common theme among all of these women in this community that I found that were thriving inside of their homes. The first step that everybody took was decluttering. So, so anyways, before I go on a complete rant, because like I said, I could talk about this forever. I want to give you, Shannon, an opportunity to share because you've literally built a career about this. Like, why is decluttering like so life changing? And I know that's such a loaded question and you could probably go on forever, but kind of like in a nutshell, like why is finding that a little bit more minimal lifestyle? And I know the term minimalist has so many variations, but why is decluttering in general just so life changing for most people?
I think what happens is when we start to evaluate our belongings and say what's worth keeping and what's worth getting rid of, we then take that question and we can apply it to every other aspect of life. And that's what makes it so life-changing. So yes, it's life-changing just in the practical element of, the UCLA study that showed that we, reduce our housework by 40% if we declutter. I mean, that's just right there, motivation enough. So we do get that level of satisfaction from the decluttering. But what makes it life-changing for the long haul is to be able to say, what do I want to keep in my life? What do I want to get rid of? What matters to me? What do I want to be spending my time on? If I get 40%, or if I get 60%, or I don't know, math is hard, but whatever, I get all this time back from decluttering. What do I want to do with it? Or you can look at your schedule and say, what is worth keeping in my schedule? Because you're really honing this muscle of intentionality of saying, I'm not just going to let all this stuff live in my house and I don't even know where half of it came from, or I forgot that I have half of it. And yet it causes a lot of stress because it's hanging over our heads like a silent to-do list. And in that regard, we look at the rest of our lives and we get off of autopilot and we're like, wait a minute, I don't have to just accept what comes my way in my schedule, in my relationships, in my faith, in whatever it might be. We get to make a conscious, intentional choice to create a life that is really meaningful to us, that is really fulfilling to us, just like we get to create a home that feels really good to us, where we're using the things we love, where we know what we own, where it does make our house way more manageable so that we can focus on the things that matter instead of being like, oh, I have to clean up a million toys every single second of the day. And so you're snapping at your kids, you're mad at your husband because he's not helping. It affects every area of our lives. So yeah, that's kind of the short answer, I guess, of why I do think decluttering is a catalyst to make your entire life more intentional.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was so perfectly said. I love the way that you worded that. And I think the most important word that you said in there was the intentionality. Like decluttering is, people think it's frantically just like throwing everything out, and it's not really about just literally throwing everything out. It's about learning how to be intentional. And like you said, it starts with our possessions, but then it can move into so many other areas of our life. And I do want to talk about that in a few minutes here. But, like you said, it forces you to almost focus on what is really truly important to you and to be intentional with not only your possessions, but so many other areas in your life. So I love how you just said that. It also, for me, I think you were the one who said it actually. Yeah, because it was in a podcast. You were talking about, oh my gosh, Marie Kondo, and how people think she's like such a nut sometimes for going like, this sparks joy, like the littlest things like spark joy. And I'm like, okay, you might think she's like a nutcase, but that's because you've never experienced it before.
Right.
Because when you do rid yourself of all of these, possessions that were just kind of there, like you said, like on autopilot, like so much of your possessions, your schedule, your life, like it's all just on autopilot. And when you finally like rid yourself of those things and you start to become more intentional, those things that you're becoming intentional about and aren't just there by default start to spark joy. And for me, at a time where I thought I was never going to feel joy again, like I was in a deep, deep place. And I know that you have your own experience with grief. So, and this isn't just related to grief, but this is just my personal story. Like when I needed joy in my life, I was desperate for joy, And I think that is one of the biggest ways that I was able to crawl my way out of this like grief hole and this like never ending pit of darkness that I was in. Was like I became more intentional with my things, and in turn it makes you so much more grateful and appreciative for the things that you have, because you're now being so intentional about what you own and what you fill your schedule with and things like that.
Right. I'm glad you said the word gratitude, because I was about to say that the deeper level here is that we're grateful, and because we see everything we have and we know exactly why we kept it. And so we feel grateful for it. And that's the sparking joy that we're talking about. Even if it's as small as I think the example I used in that episode was like a spatula, right? Like people might say, okay, a spatula doesn't spark joy. This is silly. Well, true. Or like some cords to my computer don't spark joy. True. But when you're on your computer writing the book that you've been wanting to write, that sparks joy. Or when you pick up the spatula that's easy to flip pancakes with instead of the one that's a little too thick, that is a good moment. It feels good. You're so grateful you have that one instead of you're like digging through and you're like, oh, I guess I have to use this other one because this one I like is dirty. Right? Like these little moments matter. And so therefore you become grateful for them. And beyond that, if you're choosing to keep things that matter to you, maybe they're sentimental even, right? And you're putting them into use in your daily life, then you get to experience gratitude and nostalgia in a good way throughout life instead of having to go find it in a bin in the back of your closet, which you never do. Like a great example is even where I'm sitting right now. I used to record my podcast in my closet. And
I remember.
Then, And then I was like, okay, I got to get out of here, And so moved to the corner of my bedroom and I needed somewhere to put my podcasting equipment, like, for my computer and stuff. And so here's a long story of what I was using in the closet was not a desk. And so I said to Aaron, my husband, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll look on Facebook Marketplace and like find a desk or whatever. But then we realized that in our guest room, we had my mom's old sewing machine. My mom passed away when I was 24, so about 12 years ago. And she has a sewing machine table that they're kind of like the old style where the sewing machine's like underneath the table and then it can flip up, but it's like a flat surface if the sewing machine is down. And it even has like an extender lip and all of it. And so we had used it as a bedside table in our guest room, but it didn't really fit very well. We rarely have guests. And if we do, it's usually one person. They need one bedside table. And so we're like, oh, let's use this, right? And it's the perfect size. And so now as I record my podcast every single week, I am sitting at the desk that my mom used. She made my prom dress from scratch with this desk. She made all of my like musical theater costumes from scratch at this desk. It's very meaningful to me. And when we use the things that matter to us, it automatically helps us in the decluttering process and the overconsumption, right? I don't need to buy another desk when I'm looking around and saying, what is important in my home? I don't need to buy the cute home decor from Hobby Lobby when I have my mom's old Bible that my stepdad finally passed on to me. He had it for a couple years and realized how meaningful it would be for me to have it. So he gave it to me as a gift. And I found this display case and now my mom's Bible's hanging on our wall. So you can find the things that matter most to you. And then that cuts back on the clutter on all of the stuff that is just junk, because clutter isn't the things that we love. I think people think this is like a form of deprivation. You have to get rid of everything. That's not the idea. The idea is, like you said, you look around and you're grateful for everything you own because it's in active use. It's on display. It's your favorite thing for a reason. That's why you decided to keep it. So it really changes your relationship with your entire home when you look around and just like, yes, this is filled with the stuff that matters to me.
Yes, I love that you just said that, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was the misconceptions of decluttering, because I think there's a lot of them. Like I had said before, like people think it's like you're just on like an angry rampage and it's like, get rid of all the stuff. It's like that's not really what it's about. And before we maybe dive deeper into that topic, I wanted to use a silly example. Well, actually, two things that you said. Like I remember the first time that I had one of those really like silly like am I really smiling over this moment? Like when it's really sparked joy. And that was, I had always wanted like copper kitchen utensils. And so years ago, I used to sell Tupperware. And even though Tupperware is a great product, I hate it's all like colorful and it's like pink and blue and green and yellow. And so it's just, I like a little bit of like cohesiveness, looking, I like my kitchen to look like cute, I guess, even when I'm cooking. Anyways, so for years I had these ugly sets of measuring cups, blue, pink, and green. They worked great, but they were so ugly. And I'm like, every time I had to go bake or something or even just pull them out, I was like, I hate these. Like, I literally hate them. I hate looking at them. I hate using them, whatever. So I finally remember, like, first of all, why do I have 3 sets of them? This was mid-journey. And the second of all, I'm like, I hate these. Like, why am I using them? So I got rid of them. I donated them. And I remember buying my first set of copper measuring cups. And it's such a silly thing, but now every time I go to use my copper measuring cups, I'm like, I love these. Like, I love pulling out my measuring cups. I only have one because I only need one set. And now every time I go using them, I'm like, I love these, you know, like it sparks like that little bit of joy. So that's just another like silly, like spatula example. It's like, you really do find like appreciation when you hold on to the things that you really love and really enjoy using. Like, you become more grateful. And so that was just another like silly example.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I have the same
and
thing. I have like light pink plates that we use that we eat off of. And I remember we had 4 plates that, like nice plates that my sister-in-law had given us for our wedding years ago, and they were fine. But then we had another child, and so we were like, okay, and you know, to my credit, let me brush my shoulders off. That was one thing we didn't have too much of, was plates. You know, we had too much of too much else before I decluttered, but we didn't have too many plates. So we had these 4 dinner plates, but they were just white, and you know, they're great, whatever. But it was time to get some more plates, just so when we had guests over or our kids, you know, whatever, we're going to be a family of 5. And I thought I could just get more white plates, or I could get light pink plates that make me happy every time I use them. And you know what's interesting? I don't think, you know, save when they start breaking, hopefully never, but, you know, I don't have to go replace plates, or I'm not going to follow a trend when someone posts their cute dining set or whatever it might be. When we really think about what we own and love it, then the overconsumption doesn't come. I don't want any other plates. I want to eat off my cute pink plates. They bring me joy every single day. You're not going to go back and buy different, you know, measuring cups now because you like it. Right. And so we can take that into our closets. Don't buy something because it's $8 on Temu. It's going to rip. You're going to have to buy something else. You're not going to know if it's going to fit, whatever. Spend a little bit more money, because in the long run, you'll be spending that same amount of money on stuff that's not going to stick around, on the one thing that you love, right? And but what that requires is slowing down a second and figuring out what you want, what you love. If you say, this is a great example from the book, The Year of Less by Kate Flanders. She decided she was going to buy a sweatshirt, but she was very determined not to buy something that she didn't need and not overconsume and the whole thing. And so she goes, when I had to sit back and think, I'm only going to have one sweatshirt in my entire wardrobe, you better believe I didn't buy the first cute sweatshirt that an Instagram ad showed me, right? She's like, I really thought it through. I thought, do I want a hood or do I not want a hood? Do I want a front pocket or not? Do I want it to zip up or do I want it to be a pullover? What kind of material? How much bigger? Do I want it a little oversized or do I want it more fitted? She said, it made me think through what I wanted from a sweatshirt. And so therefore, she got this sweatshirt. It's her only sweatshirt, but she loves it. And it just requires slowing down a little bit. So I don't tell people you can never buy anything ever again. The idea is to slow down the consumption of what's coming into our house so that it doesn't become clutter, so that you love your measuring cups and you love your plates and you love your sweatshirt and you're just living a life of everything that you love. It's the best.
Right. Yes, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that you are living this like boring life with nothing. And really it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. It's actually like, I actually love everything that I own now. And I enjoy, you know, putting clothes on now, getting dressed in the morning, because I actually really like the clothes that are in my closet. I know that one was huge for me. And I think that's huge for other people. You would know better than me, but I think clothes is huge. I remember getting rid of a ton of my clothes, and I'm actually starting to get to the point where I feel like I need a little bit more of an overhaul. Not because I have too many, but because I'm starting to go like, do I love this anymore? You know? And for me, like, this was my biggest problem when it came to decluttering. I used to be such a cheapo, like, and I still am, but it's more because I've learned to slow down and go, is this worth my money? Not because I'm not willing to invest into something that I really love, but it's more like I never buy anything for myself because I just know I give it so much thought. I'm like, yeah, but do I need that? Am I going to use it? Do I really love it? Like, those are all the questions that I ask myself now. And so for me, for a while, like one of my hardest things was my clothes, was because first of all, I didn't know what I love, and that's its own issue in and of itself. You know, women in general, I think, just have a harder time like finding clothes that I just love the way I look in this, you know. That's probably just like a universal issue. But anyways, so for me, one of my biggest issues when it came to decluttering was going through my clothes. And so that's kind of what I want to ask you next is like, what do you think, in your opinion, are like the main issues that people face when they're trying to declutter their homes? Like for the first time, when they're going into this, I'll say blind, meaning they've never done it, or they're just at the beginning of their journey, or they're still really learning, like, you know, what it's like and learning to live with that intentionality. Like, what are those main problems that people face at first?
There's a few big ones that I see pop up in my community a lot and that I remember well and still struggle with sometimes. I think a big one is one you just touched on is money. We feel like decluttering is a waste of money, and we look at all the stuff we're getting rid of and all we can see is like dollar bills. We're like, I'm throwing away money. And so therefore we think, how, if I keep it, then eventually it'll be worth it, the money, you know, like I will have proven its value. Maybe I will wear it next year. So we have that sunken cost fallacy, right? Where we've sunk the money into it. We've bought the shirt or the dress. We've sunk the time and the space into it. We've been holding on to it in our closets. We've had it for the last 3 years. We've only worn it once or never. And so we've sunk so many resources into it that it's really difficult from a psychological perspective for us not to want to continue holding on to it for that what if moment when we think that that value will have been worth it, right? And I actually have an entire podcast episode about this feeling of wasted money because there's a lot of aspects to it. But I think the biggest one that I would encourage people to keep in mind is that the money, we all know that you can't get the money back, right? Even if you try and sell it, we have the endowment effect. We always think that the things that we own are worth more than they are to someone else. Even if you bought that sweater for $80 and you put it on Facebook Marketplace for $40, no one's going to buy a $40 sweater. You're going to be lucky if you get $15 from an $80 sweater on Facebook Marketplace. And it's not worth the effort half the time. Most of us are going to procrastinate because taking a picture and posting it up feels like a lot of work, right? And so really, you're not going to be getting that money back. But beyond that, you actually are making a smart financial choice by decluttering for a couple of reasons. One, when you hold on to everything, you cannot find anything. So those repeat purchases you're afraid of making, like, oh, I don't want to get rid of this. What if I need it again someday? Well, you're not going to be able to find it and use it, right? You're not going to easily be able to access it. You're going to be like, whatever, I'll buy another $5 pair of fabric scissors this one time, you know, because you can't find the ones you haven't used. And it just adds up. You are making the repeat purchases anyway. What you would be better off for financially in your future is just really paring down what you own. Only keep what you use on a regular basis so you know where it is, so you can use it. There's that aspect of saving money going forward. There's the aspect of coming face to face with all of your clutter. That is motivation going forward to not, when you're at the store and you've just decluttered your closet, you think a lot harder about what you might be buying, right? Because you're like, I just decluttered my closet. And you've just come face to face with the stuff that you thought was really cute that one time when you bought it, and you just donated it. So it makes you think about your purchasing moving forward. And the amount of money we save moving forward is monumental. So this is actually a great financial decision because you're not getting the money back anyway. So the only way forward, if you're thinking about finances, is changing what's happening in the future because you cannot change what's happened in the past. And decluttering really helps you change your future. And I would also say too that when it comes to that guilt we feel when we're decluttering, when the money guilt, just as a reminder, guilt and shame are different. If you are familiar with Brene Brown's work, she really specifies that shame says, I am bad. I did something bad. Or not just I did something bad. I am bad because I did whatever I did. Versus guilt is kind of an arrow pointing you in the right direction. If you feel kind of guilty that you spent this amount of money on something, then don't let that spiral into shame or decide I have to keep it because that's not useful. Let that be an arrow, like I said, pointing you into a different direction next time you're tempted to purchase something similar. And so guilt isn't a bad thing if you think about money. And then real quick on the consumption side of money, if we're talking about buying things that are more sustainable, that are going to last you longer, that you actually enjoy and love. Just, logically speaking, I use the white tea like version of this all the time. I'm like, I can buy a really cheap $10 white t-shirt that will rip, that will shrink, that will pill, and all of that, which will then make me need to buy another white t-shirt when that one's bad. And I'll go through buying that one. And that's going to happen over a period of 3 years or less. You're going to have bought 8 or more white t-shirts. Or you could buy, so 8 times 8, $64. Instead of buying one $8 t-shirt all the time, buy a $64 white tee, right? And that feels really overwhelming for people like you and me who, we're good stewards of our money. We don't want to waste our money. We want to save it for things that matter. A white t-shirt, doesn't matter. I'd rather just buy the $8 one off Temu, right? No, you're going to be spending that money anyway. Buy the $64 one that is sustainably made so that you're not harming the environment. You're not harming workers who are being exploited overseas, and it's going to fit you. It's going to be nice. It's not going to pill. When you have 100% organic cotton, you can wash it in the washing machine. That was a big thing I learned as I started my more kind of sustainable consumption. I was so worried. Like, I have kids. I have 3 kids that like wipe their boogers on me half the time. Like, I have to wash my clothes all the time. I can't buy an $80 white tee. But no, once you really learn about this, you realize that these kinds of materials are much, much more I don't know what the word is. I can't think of durable, than
Durable,
we think.
yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of I would say the consumption and decluttering piece when it comes to money. That's the biggest one that I hear about is as being a roadblock for people.
Yeah, same. And one of the well, first of all, you just said so many amazing things. So I hope everyone was listening carefully. So much good info that you just shared. And one of the main things that you said that I hear often is the, what if I need it again in the future? Right. And I can confidently say, as someone who has gotten rid of, literally, I haven't really figured out what it is because I wasn't really paying attention as it was going out the door. But when I step back and I think about how many things, even just in that first main decluttering session, like I've gotten rid of so much stuff since then. But in that first like main getting rid of everything, I would say I probably got rid of 60% of possessions in my home. And so, and then that doesn't even include all the things that I've gotten rid of since. And so 2 things I want to touch on. One, I can count maybe twice, maybe 3 times how many times I've gone, oh, I got rid of that and I could have used it. Mm-hmm. And it was like a $5 item, it was like something so small. It was something so insignificant. It was like something that was easily purchasable, or repurchasable. You know what I'm saying? Like I can just go and get it. So that excuse seems big in the moment, but when it's gone, like you really don't, unless you're a crafter, like you use the fabric scissors, example, unless like crafting is your job, your career, and you have like, you make a living off of, okay, like that's a different story, but we're just talking about like, your average everyday things. There are so few instances after I have gotten rid of so much of my things that I have been like, oh, I got rid of that thing and I could have used it. So that kind of dispels that argument. And I'm sure that's the same case for you. And the other thing when it comes to money, when people feel like it's a waste, the way that has helped me is I donate a lot of my stuff. I do not I throw stuff out that is totally, that I would feel embarrassed wanting, donating it over to somebody else. That's the only stuff I throw out, unless it's literal garbage. I donate a lot of my stuff, and honestly, like that makes me feel good. Like I'm, I think the majority of people in the world want to help other people and, want to give when they're able to. And so for me, I have found this one place that takes donations for vets and their families. Like to me, I'm happy to give stuff to people who are, in need. And so to me, that relieves a lot of that guilt. If I'm like, oh, I spent money on this, whatever, it's like, I'm helping somebody else, And so I'm not sure if I know you donate a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure if that helped you too and your decluttering journey to relieve some of that guilt. But I try to encourage people to always like donate, or even to friends and family. Like, to people who have kids, you could pass down your hand-me-downs to them, like I know for me, when our kids moved in, like that was super helpful for me. Like what was maybe hard for somebody else to get rid of, like a lot of clothes that they spent so much money on, was a huge blessing to me, and it saved me a lot of money. So when it comes to this idea of money, when you're donating or giving your things to someone else who actually really needs it, it kind of relieves a little bit of that guilt feeling of, I spent so much money on it, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And we can combine those things, that what if struggle, with the joy of donating. But first, starting with the what if thing, I think a big one that you just touched on was that we have this negativity bias. It's an actual research supported psychological bias that we have, that we will notice and remember often the losses and the negativity. So when you get rid of hundreds of items like you and I have, we can both point to one, maybe two things that we say, oh, I wish I had kept that. And honestly, I can't think of one. So that, that I think is already rare. But let's say you think of one or two.
And in this moment, I can't even think of what it was. I just know I had one or two moments of like, oh, I did get rid of that. But I don't even remember what it was.
Exactly, right? It's not good. It's not like changing your life in a negative way. But anyways, if you have that moment, that's the negativity bias. You're remembering the one time you got rid of something and needed it the next day versus the hundreds of times you got rid of something and never thought about it again, right? And that's the negativity bias. And you are letting that one instance change your mind. And like you said, most of the time, it's something you can easily borrow, makeshift, reacquire. You got rid of your vases. Somebody finally gave you flowers. It had been 10 years. Your husband comes home with flowers, which he's never done before. And you're like, I don't have a vase anymore. You know what? Put it in a mason jar. You know what? Like you can makeshift most of this too. But even if you need to repurchase it, let's say for $20, something that isn't just a $5 repurchase, but you have decluttered your home and all of that money stuff we just talked about, you've changed your entire consumption moving forward. I promise you, you made up for that $20 purchase by not buying that one cute dress for your daughter because you knew she had enough summer dresses and you came face to face with that. And so you no longer overconsume. There's your $20 that had been back in your pocket. You can go ahead and buy that item that you got rid of that you needed because you've saved hundreds, if not thousands of dollars moving forward because you decluttered and changed your consumption habits. You know what I mean? So like if you need to replace one $20 thing 3 years from now, so be it, because you've already gotten that money back in your pocket. I cannot tell you how much it has changed our lives financially because I don't consume anymore in that overconsumption kind of a cycle. And so, if you get rid of something, you're fine. You've saved the money. You've saved it up through your decluttering to buy it. And then combining this donation idea as well is that instead of saying, what if I need it again, you can say, what if this can help someone else right now versus the what if of your future? Because first of all, no future is guaranteed. Okay. And so it is important to live now. And I don't know about you, but I would rather, instead of thinking of some obscure what if in my future, what if I don't know, I can't even think of an example right now, but whatever it is might be about your future. But then you switch that question. What if this can benefit someone else right now? That's more important. That is more pressing. And it, like you said, it benefits us. Generosity is a key component to well-being. I mean, look at any of the research that is out there. People who are generous are multiple times happier than people who are not. There's a great book I'm reading even currently called Infectious Generosity. It's by the founder of TED, like TED Talks. And he talks about all of these different benefits of generosity and how one act of generosity is infectious even, and how it can really change the entire world, the scope of the world. How many times has let's take a Starbucks drive-through. Somebody buys your Starbucks in line, you buy it for the person behind you. It's a chain reaction. And so, the idea though, is that generosity isn't just good for the people who are receiving it. It's also great for you, and it's great for the community at large. So what if you want to keep it? Well, switch that around. What if it can benefit someone else right now?
Yeah, I love that. I love that there's so many opportunities to talk about decluttering in a way that it is makes you generous and more grateful. Like it's just so much more just about your possessions. And I just love that you're pointing that out, that it's not just about what we own and owning, and getting rid of things like going back to that misconception of like what decluttering is. Like it's so much deeper than that. There's so many layers to decluttering and how life-changing it can be. And it's kind of a perfect segue into kind of what I want to steer the conversation towards for the remaining is this idea. So I mentioned this idea of spring cleaning versus spring clearing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to focus on, cleaning their house at a time like this. But like I mentioned before, like, and we've been saying, like, your efforts at this time of year, if what we're looking for is a fresh start, our efforts will almost always be better used towards focusing on clearing things out of our home and of our lives too. And so, because like I said, if people are looking for an actual fresh start, what better way than to kind of give yourself this launch pad for like a new way of life, one where you can actually have a home that isn't the bane of your existence, like one where you can actually enjoy being in, and where you have more time to do the things that you want and the freedom to do other things rather than stressing about, cleaning your house all weekend and things like that. Because, like you mentioned before, decluttering can start with physical items inside of our home for sure. And that is the most practical place to start. But I know for me, like it didn't stop there. And like you said, it kind of, it's the catalyst for this new way of simplifying your life and just being super intentional about your life and your time. And so, clearing of your chaotic schedules or overly draining relationships or bad habits, hobbies that you don't really love anymore, but you kind of are just doing, or maybe you're kind of doing because people know you as that person, but you don't really want to do it anymore and things like that. Like this is where we should start focusing our energy on if we're looking for a real fresh start, this time of year. And so, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. And so do you, Shannon, like, do you see this a lot with people? Like they start in their home and then it like starts to work their way out to their schedules, relationships, routine, habits. Like I know this, but do you see this happening with other people that, you speak to or talk to who start that decluttering journey?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a kind of a cycle where you start with the decluttering and then it affects the rest of your life. And then because you're intentional the rest of your life, you don't overconsume. So you have less clutter. It's a snowball effect in a good direction, yeah. Right? And I see this all the time. I see it most clearly with the people who have taken the time from the get-go to focus on their core values and like their why behind what they're doing. Because all of us will become very overwhelmed or just throw up our hands, get distracted, whatever it might be, if we don't have a bigger picture and goal in mind of why we're doing this. If it's just because, my house is stressing me out, that's a great, excellent, motivation. However, yes. Odds are you're also going to burn out a little bit. You have to go a little bit deeper than that. And so I always encourage people to know their why through aligning the choices they're making with decluttering, whether it's in their homes or their schedules, with their core values. And core values, it's kind of like the word purpose, where no one really knows what it means. You're like, that I feel like I should know my core values. What does that mean? Or I know I should have a purpose, but what does that mean, right? So core values, I like to break it down into like 3 different components. Because if you think about a value, let's take monetary value, money. It's putting a monetary, or a metric, I should say, onto the worth of something. So what is this worth? It's the monetary value of that is kind of how we digest it. And so if we're talking about our core values, it is a metric to which we hold up our belongings or whatever is in our life and say, is this worth keeping? Does it align with my values? Like, is it valuable enough to hold on to? And so core values, you can break it down into the way that I like to do it is breaking it down into your morals, your experiences, and your codes of conduct. So morals are things like I want to be kind. I want to be generous. I am the kind of person who is patient, is loving, right? What are your morals? What are the kinds of things that help you determine if what you're doing is right and wrong? You can look at your core values as experiences. What are experiences that are important to you? Do you love to travel? Right? Do you love to be with your friends? Those are experiential core values. And then you have codes of conduct. I know I want to be on time. I know I don't want to raise my voice, right? Those are your codes of conduct. And so I think it's helpful to break it down into those three components. And then you can hold up those components to, let's say, your clutter, your physical belongings. So if you have a bunch of different shoe options and they're all kind of by the front door, and your daughter has like 6 different color sandal options that she can match to her dresses, and like your son has 3 different sneakers or whatever it might be. Is it helping you stay aligned? Does your stuff bring you closer to or further from your core values? So for me, I have a hard time getting shoes on my 3 little boogers to get them out the door, right? They are ages 3, 5, and 7. And I tell you what, it is an Olympic sport getting them out the door. And to have that many shoe options, we're all tripping over it. My daughter doesn't know which ones she wants to wear. It's a mess. It's a disaster, right? So are all those shoe options bringing me closer to my core values of being somewhere on time, of not raising my voice, right? No. They're not. And so when you can start looking at your stuff, does this bring me closer to my core values? Does an $8 Temu shirt, I keep bringing that option up. I don't really know why. That must be stuck in my head. But if that, whatever, does that bring you closer to your core values? Are you somebody who is generous and empathetic and kind, but you refuse to think about who's making your clothes? Someone who is, human labor, because that's why your clothes are so cheap. And you can't just be like, oh yeah, that aligns with my core values. It doesn't, right? And so but then on the flip side, a core value of yours might be to be fiscally responsible, right? So how do you marry the two of those things? And this just takes a little bit more thought, but it becomes more second nature. You're able to identify the things that are worth keeping in your life, the friendships that are worth keeping in your life, or maybe the friendships you want to pour more effort into, right? Instead of just waiting for them to be convenient, you're like, wait, no, that person, that spending time with them is important to me. It's a core value to be around people who inspire me, to make me laugh, make me happy to be alive, right? And so you need to pour into those. It becomes more obvious what's worth keeping. Is it aligning with your core values to be running to every single extracurricular in the evening? Maybe it is. But for my family, I was like, no, I want to sit around the table. That's a core value to me. That's a code of conduct or experiential core values to sit around the table. So what does that mean? Is right now in this season of life, my kids get one extracurricular, and it cannot be every night of the week. We have to sit down and have family dinner together. And all of these decisions, our belongings, our schedules, our relationships, they come into clear view when we've really identified those core values. So that's when I see the people who really see this overarching change are the ones that have taken the time to do that.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. So good. Oh my goodness. Because I think what happens is you start to realize, like when you start decluttering your things, and then like you just said, then you start to figure out like, okay, what are my core values? And is everything that I'm doing reflecting, giving me or pointing me to those core values or allowing me to live those core values out? And it starts to become, like you just said, it starts to become really obvious in all of the other areas of your life too. And I think a big one that you just touched on is, in general, with kids, is those extracurricular activities. I think parents have this. I wasn't even planning on talking about this, but I love this because I'm very passionate about it. I think parents have this like mindset most of the time that it's like they have to run themselves ragged to like keep up with their kids and their kids' schedules. And I always want to be like, do you know that you have control over like what extracurricular activities like your kids do? And it's a balance, because you don't want to hold your children back from the things that they love doing and the things that they want to do. But it's also like, but do you also want to run yourself ragged? And do you not want to have family dinners? And, do you not like you said, you have to decide what your core values are. And if you decide that your core values, have to do with family time and, dinners around the table and things like that, but everybody has 6 places to go 6 nights of the week, like they don't align. And we have control over those things. And so I think that's a part that's missed is, we can we can declutter all the things in our home, and that's great. But if you don't allow it to lead you to being more intentional about, like you said, I love that core values and, illustration. Like if you don't allow it to let you set up your life for intentionality that reflects your core values, like it didn't really change much, like it didn't really
Right.
change much about the way that you're living your life. Sure, your home might be easier you might be tripping over less things, and it might take you less time to get ready in the morning. Like you said, it's a snowball. Like decluttering in your home, like, is a snowball, but we want to make sure that we don't just stop there, because the snowball can keep snowballing past those physical possessions. It's so much deeper than that. It can be if you allow it to be. And so I really love that core values illustration that you just gave, because I think a lot of people in this day and age are not living out their lives that reflect a lot of their core values, because I think they just are victims to their schedules and their relationships that have always been there and their things and all of that stuff. And one of the biggest like wake up calls for me was like, I am not a victim to my life. Like everything I actually just did, I got invited to speak at this like motherhood group at a church. And that's what I talked about. I talked about how, because they asked me to talk about time management. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good at managing my time. But I think the issue here for most people, and this was a motherhood group, so I was talking to moms, like the issue is not that you don't have enough time. The issue is that you're not prioritizing your time correctly. You are pouring it into so many things that aren't really important to you, as you would describe them, that reflect your core values. And do you know that you have complete control over that? Like that was kind of my message. Like, hey, women, like, you are powerful, mighty people. Like you can do a lot of things with your time. Like don't sell yourself short, but don't forget, do you remember that you have complete control over your time? Now, I'm not talking about the newborn phase. I'm not talking about when someone in your house is sick or you're pregnant and can't, like, I'm not talking about the special circumstances. I'm talking about the everyday, day-to-day life. Like you said, the extracurricular activities with your kids. Like, I think people just, in general, become victims to the chaos and to the busy schedules and the lots of stuff and the overconsumption and all of those things. And it's like, there's a lot of things in life we don't have control over, but the things that we do have complete control over, I think people waste their time trying to control the things that they have no control over, and they don't spend nearly enough time being more intentional and carefully curating control over the things that they have all control over. And I think that's a big problem to people not creating a life that they want to live, that they want to escape from and go on vacation constantly. Now, don't get me wrong, everybody loves going on vacation, but it's like, if every day is a struggle, it's like, maybe it's time to start reevaluating like everything, and that sounds a little dramatic, but it's like, it sounds dramatic, but it's like, you can evaluate everything in your life. Everything is up for reevaluation. And it's funny. I'm quoting my grief coach now, who said that to me. Like when you go through loss and you go through tragedy, and again, this principle can be applied to anybody. You don't have to go through loss or tragedy. But for me, this was just my story. Her quote was, everything becomes a reevaluation. And it's so true. And I think my biggest message that I want to get to people, like literally in life, is don't wait for like a tragedy to like reevaluate your life. Like don't wait for like the world to like gut punch you. Like you don't have to wait for that to reevaluate almost everything in your life, because it can be life changing. Like you can create a life that you love and that you really, really enjoy, and that sparks so much joy. Like you can do this for yourself. Like all you have to do is like stop being a victim to the things that you own and the schedules that you're trapped in, and the relationships that you're trapped in. Like everything is up for reevaluation. And I think that's the message that gets missed a lot with people.
Yes. I mean, that's what decluttering is. You're looking at things and reevaluating if you want to keep it, because it's already there. And that is the case with everything else in life too. We can look at it all and say, is this what I want to keep? And of course, as much as we have agency, there are certain things, like you said, that are out of our control. We need our jobs to put a roof over our head, so that level of our schedule might not be available. There's certain things that are just not in our control, our husband's work schedule, whatever it might be. But I always, let people know that while there is great privilege in saying that our schedules and our lives reflect what is important to us, because I know that is not always the case, the vast majority of us have at least 5 or 10 minutes a day to decide that something is important enough to put effort towards. And it's, we all know that consistency adds up. When I wrote my first book, I wrote 500 words a day, which is like an email. It was a very low word count, but I knew that I was pregnant, 8 months pregnant when I started writing it with my second. So I had a toddler at home, 8 months pregnant. Then I was postpartum in this book writing process. And I knew that on my worst day, I could write 500 words, and it would take maybe an hour on my worst day, but I could do it. On my best day, I could fly through it in 20 minutes. And, I actually made that my upper limit too. I said, even if I'm having a good day, I'm not going to go past 500 words because I need to, not overextend myself and then give myself an excuse not to do this tomorrow. I need to show up and do 500 words every single day. And so if you're thinking to yourself, I don't have the privilege of revamping my entire schedule to fit in decluttering or to change, and have family dinners or whatever does align with your core values. You have 5 to 10 minutes a day. I guarantee it. If you're listening to this podcast, you have 5 or 10 minutes a day. Okay.
Right.
And so you can decide, I'm going to do my socks in 5 minutes. I'm going to go through and get rid of the ones that have holes in them. Right. And you can start with something that is that inconsequential, but it begins building this decluttering muscle. You can say, I can't have dinner with my kids, but what I can do is when we're in the car, turn off the music and turn off the screens and ask my kids about their day in the car on their way to the extracurricular. Even if they fight it, this is a core value and this is going to become a new habit in our lives. You can find the little pockets of time to make these changes until you are able to make them in a larger capacity, which, you can surprise yourself as to how much time you actually do have. Once you start looking for the pockets, you're like, oh, these pockets are a little bigger than I first realized they were because I was watching Traders last night. You know what I mean? And so it's
guilty.
So don't overdo it. Just start with 5 to 10 minutes a day moving towards your core values and see where that takes you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Because that's huge. I think, some people listen to, these kinds of talks and it's like, oh, it's overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming to go, I have to reevaluate my whole life. Like, that's why when I said that, I was like, it sounds dramatic because if you try to do it all at once, that is overwhelming. Like, you shouldn't be doing it all at once. So thank you for pointing that out. It can come in tiny little pockets. And actually, unless you do have the privilege of doing an overhaul. And actually, that's kind of how my life was. Everything came to a halt. So I certainly didn't do an overhaul on my life all at once, but I'll say given the gift of time. And so if you have that privilege and you can do a lot at once, that's great. But if you don't, finding those really small pockets of time, it's the snowball, that little pocket of time turns into, hey, I actually, like you said, like I have more of these pockets than I really realize. And that small consistency will start to motivate and just roll. And before you know it, you'll look back and go, oh my gosh, like, look at all of the changes that I've made. Like, look at all of the reevaluations that I've, been able to, do for myself and that have, caused other great things to happen. Like you said, it's that snowball. And I love that analogy because that is what decluttering does for people. Decluttering in its purest form is a tiny snowball that allows you to that allows itself to roll into this giant ball of this new amazing life, this new amazing way of life that I think a lot of people are looking for. And so kind of just wrapping up, that's my main point of this message of this podcast is like, sometimes we're looking for that fresh start. And so it's March or it's April. And so everybody's like, I need a fresh start. So they start scrubbing everything. And the message I want to try to get across is even though I love cleaning and I'll never discourage you from cleaning, but my point is, that fresh start that we're looking for, like, probably isn't coming from like really clean shower grout right now, or super sparkly baseboards because company's coming or whatever it is. Like, although it's a nice feeling, that fresh start, that reevaluation of life, like might not be coming from spring cleaning. It's probably coming from a good spring clearing. And whether that's one giant, I've been given the privilege of lots of time, so I'm going to, overhaul, or if it's just in those little pockets of time, they will add up. Like, it's guaranteed that these small, consistent changes will start to add up and they will start to snowball into big changes. And it all starts with decluttering.
That's right.
So,
and it's a feedback loop. That's the word I couldn't think of earlier. It's a feedback loop. The more you put in the input and the out, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. If I keep going, we will run out of time. So, I'm so grateful that you were here today. But before I kind of like sign off, I just want to give you an opportunity to just share with everybody, like your social media, anything that you want to put out there, your book, your podcast, any other outlets. Like, I want to give you an opportunity to just, share that with everybody that's listening.
Thank you. Well, you can obviously, if you enjoy podcasts, you feel free to listen to my podcast. It's called the Paring Down Podcast. I always remind people there's no I in pair for paring down, so PARING. Paring Down Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at paring_down. And yeah, all of my information is really there in my Instagram and my bio. I have a free Know Your Why worksheet where you can actually work through those core values we talked about. I have a bunch of different free options. I have I'm not a Christian-based account, but sometimes my own beliefs pop up because I am me. And so I have Treasures of the Heart, a 7-day Bible study on breaking free from material attachments. That's free as well. I have a complete guide to decluttering kid stuff. So all of that is in the bio of my Instagram. So at paring_down.
Awesome. Yay. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was kind of like a last minute booking. And so I was like so thrilled to have you. I've honestly been looking forward to asking you to be on. So today was just like an absolute pleasure to have you on. So to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you're alerted of new episodes. I can't wait to chat with you all again really soon. Signing off for now, your hope dealer, Emmy Smaz.